Today we are going to check where our ribs and our pelvis are in connection with one another. And this has a lot to do with that low belly pooch because of the pressure system within your belly. So if your diaphragm and your pelvic floor are not working in conjunction with one another because of your posture, so you might have a rib flare, which we're going to go over, then your pressure system might be pushing forward, which can create diastasis recti. It can be pushing down. So if you think about taking a deep breath, there is going to be pressure that occurs within this system here. So it can go out the front. It can go down through down. Pressure can go down, which would be prolapse. It can go down, so maybe not out here, but down, pressing down into the low belly, creating that low belly pooch. So we need to make sure that our posture, that we know where we are with posture. And I'm going to take us down to the floor because it tends to make it easier to really figure out where you are. Standing up, gravity changes everything. So we're just going to lay down and work with gravity on this one. So the first thing you need to do is figure out your pelvis. What is the posture of your pelvis? So if I take my hands, I'm going to put them in a triangle. My thumbs are touching my fingers, my pointer fingers are touching. I'm going to place them down on my pubic bone. And you will need to lift your head up just gently. So lift up just a little bit and you're going to look down. And you're going to see, can you see them in a straight line? Can you see your fingers, your thumbs, and your fingers? The index, the pointer fingers. Can you see both of them? Are they in a straight line? If, when you look down, if you notice your index fingers are higher than your thumb, I'm trying to show it here, I know it's hard to see. So if I'm here, that means I am in a posterior pelvic tilt. That means it is rounded under. My tailbone is lifting up to the ceiling. I probably have started to flatten my low back out, and my glutes are tight. Okay? So that is not a position. You might have tight pelvic floor issues, especially on the back side. So we don't want that. You might be a glute clincher, it creates other problems as well. So we need to fix that. The other thing, if you look down and you see your thumbs, but you can't see your index fingers, your pointer fingers, that probably means that you are an anterior pelvic tilter. So that means you've got that sway low back. If I take my hand, I can pretty much place it under my low back, okay? This creates low back pain, piriformis issues. You might deal with a lot of piriformis tension. Diastasis recti is a big one with this position. So this is another one that we want to work on. So what you're going to do is I want you to, if you can, lift your head up and look down and try to get them level and see what that feels like. The next thing you're going to do is bring your hands up to your ribs. So here again, there are a few things that can occur. And these can change based on what you're doing. So be aware when you get up off the floor what these ribs are doing as well. So first, just place your hands on your ribs, and I want you to feel, do they feel the same on both sides? So for me, I'm just going to tell you, because I can only tell you about myself right now, this rib is a little bit higher up than this. So this tells me that I need to work on dropping this rib cage just slightly. Another thing I notice, I actually, in this position, I feel like I'm pretty good. If you notice you're really high, if you notice that when you're here, your ribs flare out and then you kind of hollow out down here. This is called a rib flare. So your ribs are flaring. You probably, again, you can now place your hand up a little bit higher under that back. You probably have what we call a high hinge point. So if you look at yourself in the mirror, you might notice that there's like a line or a divot right here. That's a high hinge point. It does not mean that you have back fat or anything like that. It has to do with your posture. It's creating that divot there. So if your ribs flare, you have a high hinge point. You also may deal with diastasis recti. You probably deal with low back pain. So we've got to work on correcting that. So you're going to place a pillow under your head to see if you can get those ribs to drop down so that your back is on the mat. And just sit here like that and feel what that feels like, okay? The other type of person you might be is a rib gripper. Now, this isn't something I notice so much laying down, but you may. If you are a rib gripper with everything, you may feel it. Most rib grippers, you'll feel it more when you're sitting up because you're going to have that rounded shoulder, and that's where this drops down. So your internal or your external obliques, the muscles here or here, is pulling down. You create low belly pooch. So if you're really strong up here, so people I usually see that have this, you can see your six-pack abs are really starting to develop here up top, but you've got this low belly pooch. You have divots, like muscular divots on the side of your rib. You're a rib gripper. Usually I see rib grippers in plank. So when you start to do plank, I'll show you real quick because I'm a rib gripper. When I do a plank, if I do a plank the way I like to do it, see how my back is rounded up? So that means that I'm gripping with my upper abs and I'm pulling down, which when I do that, it's pushing all of the pressure down into my low belly. So you've got to get away from doing that. So when we sit up, we want to think about not being in this position, because when we go into this position, what do you immediately feel? Those ribs start to close down towards one another, and you start to grip with your ribs. Your ribs grip, so that anytime you're doing certain movements, you're going to be gripping. One thing I've noticed as a rib gripper, I'm going to move this up a little bit since I'm sitting up. As a rib gripper, some of my breathing pattern has changed. I've created more anxiety because of how I sit and grip this constant down. So something to work on. I notice when I'm sitting, I feel it more. And what you need to do, so if you're sitting, you can test your ribs out. Again, your pelvis is going to need to be in neutral and sitting. So if I'm here, I can be tilting forward and you're going to have that low back arch, or I'm going to be rounded and I'm going to be slouching. So we want to find that in-between position. So there's a little arch in the low back, but not a big one. And then I'm going to feel my ribs again, and I'm going to feel, what do they feel like? So you don't want them flaring, sticking that chest out, because you're going to be increasing your diastasis recti, and you don't want to be gripping, right? So we want to work on thinking about lengthening through that spine. And when you start to think about lengthening, I always think about going back up the spine, not lengthening from here because then my chest gets lifted, but I want to think about lengthening from my spine up. So that lengthens through the back. And when I do that, I feel my transverse abs working more. So that is your day 2 of the belly pooch, kind of understanding where your ribs and your pelvis are to help you start working on better posture to protect the pressure system in your belly.